You don't set out to build something untraceable. That's the part people misunderstand later when they reconstruct the timeline and imagine deliberate ambition where there was only a chain of reactions. At the beginning, you are simply someone who understands systems better than most people around you. Systems of messages, signals, permissions, systems of trust. You work in a narrow office on the third floor of a building whose windows look out onto a parking lot and a strip of dry grass that never quite turns green. Your job title is vague enough to sound harmless, network infrastructure consultant, but your real work is more precise. You design communication systems that are resilient, encrypted, and difficult to interrupt. Your clients are companies that worry about industrial espionage and governments that worry about the same thing but call it something else. Most days, your world is structured by predictable tasks. Audit the server logs. Review encryption protocols. Patch vulnerabilities before anyone else discovers them. You move through code and architecture diagrams the way a mechanic moves through an engine, listening for the small irregularities that tell you where something might fail under pressure. You take a quiet satisfaction in systems that work exactly as intended. Predictability is the reward. The pressure you carry is mostly invisible to people outside the field. Every system eventually fails. Every encryption scheme becomes obsolete. Somewhere out there, someone is always trying to break what you build. That knowledge shapes the way you think about everything. Redundancy, compartmentalization, delay. The question is never whether a breach will happen. The question is how long it takes and how much damage it causes when it does. It's a Wednesday when the first shift happens. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just a message that appears in your inbox at 8:17 in the morning while you are halfway through your second cup of coffee and reviewing a vulnerability report for a client whose internal network still relies on security protocols designed 15 years ago. The message isn't unusual at first glance. A request for consultation. A short description of the problem. Secure communications needed for a distributed team operating in unstable regions. That kind of request happens often enough. What catches your attention is the attachment. Inside the attachment is a technical outline, precise, structured, and far more sophisticated than anything a typical client sends. Whoever wrote it understands layered encryption, packet fragmentation, and decentralized routing. They are describing a communication channel designed to operate without identifiable servers, without consistent endpoints, and without a stable traffic signature. You read it twice before you realize what it actually implies. They're asking for something that can't easily be traced by anyone, not by competitors, not by governments, not by the companies that own the infrastructure itself. You lean back in your chair and stare at the screen while the implications begin to arrange themselves in your mind. There are legitimate reasons for this kind of system. Journalists working in hostile countries, activists trying to survive under surveillance. But the design requirements go further than that. Whoever wrote this expects active pursuit from entities with serious technical capabilities. You close the message and tell yourself you will ignore it. An hour later, you open it again. The response you send is cautious. You ask for clarification about the threat model. Who exactly are they trying to avoid? What level of resources do those adversaries possess? Nation-state surveillance? Corporate intelligence teams? Criminal networks? The reply arrives 6 minutes later. The answer is short. All of the above. That's the moment you should walk away. You know that even as your brain begins mapping out possibilities. You know the kind of project this could become if you say yes. But another thought moves in alongside the warning. The design challenge itself. The sheer complexity of building something that could survive that level of scrutiny. You tell yourself you are only curious. The conversation moves quickly after that. Encrypted email turns into scheduled calls routed through privacy networks. The person on the other end never gives a name. Their voice is calm and careful, the voice of someone accustomed to thinking several steps ahead of danger. They explain the situation in fragments. Their organization operates across several countries. Some members work in regions where ordinary communication channels are monitored. Messages disappear. People disappear. Conventional encryption is no longer enough because metadata alone can reveal patterns. Who talks to whom, how often, at what times. They need something better than encryption. They need invisibility. You tell them invisibility doesn't exist. Every signal leaves traces somewhere. Their response is simple. Then we reduce the traces until following them becomes impossible. You spend the next week sketching architecture diagrams in a notebook you keep locked in your desk drawer, not on your work computer, not anywhere that automatically backs up to a server. The system begins to form piece by piece. Decentralized relay nodes operating through volunteer infrastructure, layered encryption keys that rotate every few minutes, message packets disguised as ordinary network traffic. The goal isn't perfect secrecy. That's impossible. The goal is delay. Every layer forces an adversary to spend more time, more resources, more coordination. Time becomes the currency of survival. When you finally send the proposal, you expect hesitation. Instead, you receive approval within an hour, along with a financial transfer large enough to make you stare at the screen for several seconds before accepting that the number is real. That's the moment the project stops being theoretical. You begin building the first version of the channel at night, after your official workday ends. You isolate the development environment on hardware that has never touched your employer's network. Every decision is shaped by the same principle. Assume someone will eventually find this system and attempt to dismantle it. The first months are pure engineering, code, testing, failure. You learn quickly which ideas work and which collapse under realistic conditions. Messages arrive corrupted. Routing loops trap packets indefinitely. Encryption keys desynchronize between nodes. Every problem forces another decision. Do you prioritize speed or anonymity? Redundancy or simplicity? Each improvement increases complexity somewhere else. You start to notice changes in the way you think. Ordinary communication systems now look fragile to you, transparent in ways you once ignored. You see metadata trails everywhere. Email headers, server logs, IP addresses embedded in routine transactions. It becomes impossible to forget that most conversations in the world are visible to someone. By the time the first operational version goes live, nearly 9 months have passed. The system is far from perfect, but it works. Messages enter the network fragmented into dozens of encrypted packets, each routed through unpredictable paths before reassembling on the receiving end. To anyone watching the infrastructure, it looks like background noise. For a while, that is enough. The first sign of trouble arrives 2 years later. By then, the network has grown far beyond its original scale. Hundreds of nodes operate quietly across the internet, maintained by volunteers who believe they are supporting an open-source privacy experiment. Most of them have no idea what the system is actually used for. The warning comes from a technical report published by a cybersecurity firm you recognize. The report analyzes unusual traffic patterns moving through several global internet exchange points. The patterns are subtle but persistent, suggesting the existence of a large anonymized communication network operating outside known frameworks. You read the report late at night and feel a slow tightening in your chest. They haven't identified the system yet, but they're getting closer. The next weeks are a cascade of urgent decisions. You redesign packet signatures to mimic different kinds of ordinary traffic. You introduce random delays between transmissions. You build automatic node migration so parts of the network can disappear and reappear in new locations within hours. Every modification carries risk. Change too much and the system collapses under its own complexity. Change too little and investigators map the structure piece by piece. Pressure becomes constant. Messages from the organization arrive more frequently now. They rely on the channel for operations you don't fully understand, operations that seem to span continents, and political conflicts you only see summarized in news headlines. You begin to realize that the system you built is no longer just an engineering project. It has become infrastructure for decisions made by people you will never meet. That knowledge complicates everything. One evening, you notice something new in the logs. A pattern of probe requests small, carefully structured packets that test how nodes respond under unusual conditions. Whoever is sending them understands anonymization networks intimately. They are trying to map the system from the outside. You sit in front of the screen for a long time, watching the probes move through the networks like cautious footsteps in the dark. The adversary is patient, methodical. They aren't attacking yet. They are learning. You realize the system has reached the stage every complex structure eventually reaches, the moment when its existence is no longer secret. The only question now is how long it can survive. You begin designing a second generation of the channel almost immediately. This one abandons fixed nodes entirely. Messages will move through temporary relays created on demand, encrypted tunnels that exist only for minutes before dissolving back into ordinary traffic. It is the most difficult system you have ever attempted to build. Months pass, again in concentrated effort. Mistakes happen. Some messages vanish permanently during testing. Others arrive hours late. Every flaw forces you to rethink assumptions about timing, synchronization, and trust between machines that never truly know each other. During those months, you feel the psychological shift deepen. You no longer think about security in terms of protection. You think about it in terms of probability. Every layer you build increases the cost of discovery. Every weakness lowers it again. There is no final victory in that equation. When the new system finally replaces the old one, the network becomes something stranger than you originally imagined. It behaves less like a traditional communication channel and more like a living organism, constantly shifting structure, rerouting signals, adapting to pressure. For a time, the probes disappear, but the absence of pursuit brings no relief. If anything, it sharpens the awareness that somewhere out there someone else is still working the same problem from the opposite direction. They are studying traffic flows, testing hypotheses, narrowing possibilities, the same way you once studied vulnerabilities in other systems. Years pass in this quiet conflict. The organization grows more dependent on the channel with every passing month. Requests arrive for new features, faster routing, stronger anonymity guarantees. Each improvement increases both capability and responsibility. You sometimes wonder how many lives now depend on a structure that exists mostly in your head and in scattered fragments of code running across the world. The thought is not comforting. Late one night, you notice another anomaly in the logs. Not probes this time, something more subtle. A sequence of messages that appear correctly encrypted but carry microscopic timing variations that shouldn't exist. You study the pattern for hours before the realization settles in. Someone has found a way inside the edge of the system, not a full breach, not yet, but close enough to observe how messages move. The adversary has crossed the first threshold. You close the monitoring window and lean back in your chair, feeling the weight of the years that led here. Every decision, every compromise, every improvement layered on top of the last. This was always the inevitable outcome. Any system important enough to matter eventually attracts someone determined to dismantle it. Now the cycle begins again. You open the notebook where the earliest architecture diagrams still wait on yellowing pages. You start sketching new possibilities, more layers, more randomness, more distance between signal and source. Outside the window, the parking lot is empty, the strip of grass still dry and unmoving in the darkness. The ordinary world continues as if nothing has changed. But inside the quiet network you built, messages are still moving, fragmented, encrypted, slipping through shifting paths across the planet. And somewhere else, unseen hands are trying to follow them.